The village of Lumora was a place of golden fields and rolling rivers where the sun painted the sky in warm hues every evening. It was a land of peace and abundance, where families lived in harmony, working together to harvest the riches of the earth. But for young Zafina, Lumora was not a place of happiness. It was a place of silent suffering. Zafina had never known her mother, for she had passed away when Zafina was just a baby. Her father, Baba Kendi, was a hard-working man who loved his daughter dearly. But as the years passed, he believed that Zafina needed a mother's touch, someone to guide her and care for her. And so he remarried a woman named Meduna, who at first appeared to be the perfect wife and stepmother. She was gentle in her words, soft in her smile, and always eager to please Baba Kendi. The village women admired her, and Baba Kendi, blinded by love, thought he had made the right choice. But when Baba Kendi was not around, Meduna's true nature came to light. She despised Zafina, though the girl had done nothing wrong. It was as if Meduna could not stand the sight of her, perhaps because she saw Zafina as a reminder that she would never be the first woman in Baba Kendi's heart. Meduna had a daughter of her own, Nasira, who was only a year older than Zafina. To Nasira, Meduna gave everything: beautiful dresses, sweet fruits, and the finest sandals. Nasira was treated like a princess, while Zafina was treated like a servant in her own home. Meduna made her do all the house chores, fetching water, washing clothes, and cooking meals. But she never let her eat from the same pot as Nasira. Instead, she gave Zafina leftovers, often cold and stale, as if she were nothing more than a beggar. Baba Kendi often traveled for trade, sometimes leaving for weeks at a time. During these long absences, Meduna's cruelty worsened. She would wake Zafina before the sun had risen and force her to work until her hands were raw. If Zafina ever complained, Meduna would beat her or threaten to throw her out into the streets. Nasira, following her mother's example, mocked Zafina at every chance, laughing when she struggled under the weight of heavy water pots or tripped over her torn sandals. The villagers saw glimpses of Zafina's suffering, but Meduna was a cunning woman. To the outside world, she played the role of a loving stepmother, always speaking kindly of Zafina whenever people asked. If anyone questioned why Zafina looked tired or underfed, Meduna would sigh and say, "The poor girl misses her mother. No matter how much I love her, she will never see me as her own." And with those words, she turned herself into the victim, gaining sympathy while Zafina remained trapped in silence. Despite everything, Zafina did not break. She did not cry before Meduna, nor did she beg for kindness. She held her head high, even when her stomach growled from hunger, even when her body ached from exhaustion. Deep inside, she carried the strength of her late mother, a strength that no cruelty could erase. What she did not know was that her suffering was about to lead her down a path no one could have ever imagined, a path that would change her fate forever. As soon as Baba Kendi left for his trade journeys, Meduna's mask of kindness disappeared. The moment he was out of sight, her warm smiles faded, and her voice turned sharp and cruel. Without Baba Kendi to watch over his daughter, Meduna no longer pretended to care. She saw Zafina as nothing more than a burden, a shadow that did not belong in her home. And so, she made sure the girl suffered. Zafina was given little food, barely enough to keep her strong. While Nasira feasted on warm meals with fresh fruits and sweet drinks, Zafina was left with scraps, cold leftovers that tasted of rejection. Some nights, Meduna did not feed her at all, forcing her to sleep on an empty stomach, listening to the laughter of her stepmother and stepsister as they enjoyed their dinner. But hunger was not the only thing Zafina endured. Meduna made her work from sunrise to sunset. Each morning, before the first light of dawn, Meduna would shake Zafina awake and order her to fetch water from the river. The pots were heavy, too heavy for a child, but Zafina had no choice. She carried them, struggling against the weight, her feet sore from walking on rough ground. When she returned, there was no rest. She had to clean the house, wash Nasira's clothes, and cook meals she was not allowed to eat. If she was too slow, Meduna would scold her, calling her useless and lazy. If she made a mistake, she would get a slap or a harsh tug on her ear. Zafina's clothes were nothing more than rags, while Nasira dressed in bright fabrics with golden beads in her hair. Zafina wore torn, faded garments that barely covered her body. She shivered on cold nights, her only comfort being the thin mat she slept on in the corner of the house. Even the villagers began to notice the difference between the two girls. They saw how Zafina looked thinner and weaker each day, how her clothes never changed, how her eyes held a sadness too deep for a child, but no one spoke up. Meduna was a clever woman. She knew how to act innocent, how to twist the truth. When neighbors asked why Zafina looked so tired, Meduna would sigh, and shake her head. "She is a stubborn child," she would say. "No matter how much I try to care for her, she refuses to listen." And with that, she turned their pity into blame, making them believe that Zafina's suffering was her own doing. Even when some villagers suspected the truth, they did not interfere. No one wanted trouble with Meduna. She had a sharp tongue and a way of making people regret questioning her. And so, Zafina remained alone, trapped in a world where no one would save her. But no matter how much Meduna tried to break her, Zafina endured. She swallowed her pain, pushed through her hunger, and refused to cry in front of those who wished to see her weak. What she did not know was that her strength, her ability to survive, was the very thing that would one day change her fate. Meduna's hatred for Zafina burned stronger with each passing day. No matter how much she starved or mistreated the girl, Zafina refused to break. She never begged, never complained, and never shed a tear in front of her stepmother. This only made Meduna angrier. She wanted Zafina gone forever, but she knew she could not harm her openly. If Baba Kendi ever found out, it would ruin everything. She had to be smart, patient, and cruel. One evening, as she prepared dinner, an idea came to her. She had heard of a slow-acting poison made from crushed roots, one that did not kill immediately, but weakened the body over time. If she mixed just a little into Zafina's food each day, no one would suspect a thing. Eventually, the girl would grow too sick to work, too weak to survive. Baba Kendi would come home to find his daughter frail and dying, and Meduna would play the part of a grieving stepmother. It was the perfect plan. That night, while cooking, Meduna added the first tiny pinch of poison into Zafina's bowl. She made sure to stir it well, hiding any trace of its presence. When she placed the food in front of the girl, she watched closely, waiting for any sign of discomfort. Zafina, hungry from a long day of work, ate without hesitation. She had no idea that with every bite, she was swallowing poison. Days passed, then weeks. Each night, Meduna increased the amount of poison little by little, expecting Zafina to fall ill. But something strange happened. Zafina did not grow weaker. She grew stronger. Her body did not wither like Meduna had hoped. Instead, she seemed more full of life than before. Her skin glowed with health. Her energy never faded, and her strength increased. She could carry heavy water pots with ease, run faster than other children, and lift loads that even grown men struggled with. Meduna could not understand it. The poison should have been working by now. She watched Zafina closely, waiting for signs of sickness, but there were none. Instead, the girl seemed healthier than ever. It was as if the very thing meant to kill her was making her more powerful. The villagers started whispering about Zafina's strength. They saw her carrying baskets that should have been too heavy for her small frame. They noticed how she never fell ill, even when others caught fevers during the cold seasons. Some said she was blessed by the ancestors, protected by unseen spirits. Others feared her, wondering if something unnatural was at work. Meduna, however, was not impressed. She was furious. The poison had failed, and her hatred for Zafina only deepened. But she was not ready to give up yet. If this poison was not enough, she would find something stronger. She would not rest until Zafina was gone for good. Months passed, and to Meduna's growing frustration, the poison did not weaken Zafina. Instead of becoming sickly and frail, the girl became stronger than ever. At first, Meduna thought it was just luck. Maybe the poison was taking longer to work. Maybe she needed to be patient. But with each passing day, Zafina's strength only grew. She carried water pots that even grown men struggled with, balancing them on her shoulders as if they were nothing. She walked for miles without feeling tired, working from sunrise to sunset without a single complaint. When she accidentally cut herself while cooking or cleaning, her wounds healed quickly, leaving no scars. While other children caught fevers during the rainy season, Zafina never fell ill. The villagers began to notice. They whispered about the girl who never got sick, the girl who could lift more than the strongest boys in the village. Some believed she was blessed by the ancestors, protected by unseen forces. Others feared her, wondering if there was something unnatural about her strength. Meduna, however, did not believe in blessings or spirits. She only believed in her hatred for Zafina. The poison should have worked by now. It should have drained the girl's life away, but instead, it had done the opposite. Meduna clenched her fists every time she saw Zafina carrying heavy loads with ease, every time she saw the girl walking tall instead of falling to the ground in weakness. Her frustration turned into anger. Maybe the poison was not strong enough. Maybe she needed to try something different. But deep inside, she also began to feel something she had never felt before: fear. What if Zafina was truly untouchable? What if nothing could break her? The thought sent chills down Meduna's spine, but she refused to give up. She had come too far, and she would not let Zafina win. If the poison was not enough, she would find another way. No matter what it took, she would see the girl fall. Meduna could no longer control her rage. No matter how much poison she gave Zafina, the girl refused to fall. Instead of growing weaker, she had become even stronger, healthier, and more powerful than anyone in the village. It was as if the ancestors themselves had protected her. Meduna could not stand it any longer. She needed to put an end to this once and for all. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she decided to use a much stronger poison. This time, there would be no slow death, no waiting. With careful hands, she mixed a deadly dose into Zafina's food, stirring it well so that no trace of it could be seen. If the girl ate this, she would not survive the night. Meduna smiled to herself, confident that her plan would finally work. By morning, Zafina would be gone forever, and no one would ever know the truth. But just as she was about to serve the poisoned meal, an unexpected visitor arrived at their home. Elder Wamara, the village's most respected herbalist, stepped through the doorway. He was an old man with sharp eyes and a wisdom that came from years of studying plants and healing. He rarely visited unannounced, but that night, something had drawn him to Baba Kendi's house. Meduna forced a smile and greeted him, hiding her frustration. Elder Wamara, what an honor to have you in our home. Please, join us for dinner, she said, her voice as sweet as honey. Wamara's eyes moved across the room, settling on Zafina. He had always known of the girl's suffering, though he, like the others, had stayed silent. But tonight, something was different. He looked closely at Zafina. Her skin was smooth, her eyes bright, and her body strong despite the hardships she had endured. It made no sense. A girl who had been mistreated for so long should have been weak and frail, but instead, she was thriving. Something was not right. Zafina, come here, Wamara said, his voice gentle but firm. Zafina obeyed, stepping forward. The elder studied her carefully, then asked, "What have you been eating, child?" Zafina hesitated, glancing at Meduna, who stiffened at the question. "Just the food my stepmother gives me," she replied softly. Wamara frowned. He could sense something unnatural at play. He turned to Meduna, his sharp gaze piercing through her false kindness. "And what exactly have you been feeding her?" he asked. Meduna felt her hands grow cold. She forced another smile, but her heart pounded in her chest. "Just the same food we all eat, elder," she said quickly. "I take care of her like my own daughter." But Wamara was not fooled. He had seen too much in his lifetime to believe such lies. He could feel the presence of something dark in that house, something hidden beneath years of deception. Elder Wamara knew something was wrong. He could see it in the way Meduna avoided his gaze, in the tension in her hands as she gripped the serving spoon. But most of all, he could see it in Zafina, her unnatural strength, her glowing health despite years of mistreatment. It was not normal. Something had been done to this girl. Something beyond the natural ways of the world. Without hesitation, Wamara reached into the pouch he carried at his waist and pulled out a small bundle of dried leaves. "Child," he said, turning to Zafina, "drink this tea every morning for the next 3 days. It will cleanse your body." Zafina nodded, obedient as always, and took the herbs. She had no reason to doubt the elder, for he was known as the wisest healer in the land. That night, she boiled the leaves in water and drank the bitter tea, unaware that her life was about to change forever. On the 3rd day, Wamara returned to the house. He studied Zafina carefully. She looked the same, but he could feel the shift within her. The poison that had lived inside her for years was now gone. Whatever had been keeping her body unnaturally strong had finally been washed away, leaving only the strength she had built herself. Then Wamara did something that no one expected. He reached into his pouch once more, this time pulling out a small wooden bowl filled with a clear liquid. Without a word, he handed it to Zafina. "Drink this," he instructed. Zafina took the bowl and drank without hesitation. A moment passed, then another. Nothing happened. Wamara turned to Meduna, his gaze sharp as a blade. "That was the strongest poison known to man," he said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Any ordinary person would have collapsed by now. But look at her. She stands as if she drank only water." A gasp swept through the small crowd that had gathered outside the house. Word had spread that the elder was confronting Meduna and the villagers had come to witness. Whispers filled the air as they realized what Wamara was saying. Meduna took a step back, her face pale. I don't understand," she stammered. Wamara's voice grew louder, stronger. You understand perfectly, Meduna. You have been poisoning this child for years. You wanted her weak, but instead, you made her immune. Your own wickedness has given her power beyond any ordinary human. The villagers gasped in horror, their eyes turning toward Meduna with disgust and fury. How could she do such a thing to a child? At that moment, the sound of footsteps echoed through the silent crowd. Baba Kendi had returned. He stood at the entrance of his home, his eyes moving from Wamara to Zafina to Meduna, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. What is going on here? He demanded. Wamara turned to him, his face grave. Your wife has been feeding your daughter poison, Kendi. She wanted to kill her, but instead, the girl became stronger than any of us. Baba Kendi's face drained of color. He looked at Zafina, his daughter who had suffered for so long, and then at the woman he had trusted. His hands trembled as the truth sank in. This was not just betrayal. It was the deepest kind of evil. The crowd murmured, waiting for his response. But Baba Kendi could not speak. His heart was breaking, his mind struggling to accept the reality before him. The woman he had loved, the woman he had brought into his home, had been trying to kill his child, and now she would face the consequences. The village square was packed with people. The air was heavy with whispers, shock, and anger. Baba Kendi stood before the village elders, his face dark with sorrow and fury. He had spent years believing Meduna was a good wife, trusting her with his home, his daughter, but now, that trust was shattered. His own wife had been feeding poison to Zafina, trying to kill her slowly. The betrayal burned deep in his heart. Meduna knelt before the elders, her face pale, but defiant. I am innocent, she cried, her voice trembling. These are lies. Lies meant to ruin me. Elder Wamara stepped forward, his wise eyes calm but firm. Then tell us, Meduna, he said. If you have done nothing wrong, why does Zafina stand before us stronger than any ordinary person? Why did the poison you fed her fail to kill her? Meduna's mouth opened, but no words came. The villagers murmured, their anger growing. They had seen how Zafina had been treated, how she was forced to do all the work while Meduna and Nasira lived in comfort. Now, the truth was clear. Meduna had been trying to get rid of the girl all along. Then a voice broke through the tension. It's true! All heads turned to Nasira, Meduna's daughter. She stood trembling, her hands clenched at her sides. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the elders. My mother, she made me keep quiet. She said no one would believe me if I spoke, but I saw her. I saw her mix things into Zafina's food. I didn't know what it was at first, but when I realized, I was too afraid to say anything. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Nasira had betrayed her own mother. Meduna turned to her daughter, her face twisted with rage and shock. You ungrateful child, she spat. How dare you? Enough! Baba Kendi's voice boomed across the square. His fists clenched, his body shaking with anger. He turned to the elders. She must be punished for what she has done. She tried to kill my daughter. She does not deserve to live among us. The elders nodded gravely. Elder Wamara raised his hand for silence. Meduna, for the crime of poisoning an innocent child, you shall face justice. You will drink the very poison you gave to Zafina. Meduna's eyes widened in horror. She stumbled back, shaking her head wildly. No, no, you can't do this. A bowl was brought forward, filled with food from the very meal she had prepared that night. The same meal she had poisoned for Zafina. The elders placed it before her. Eat, one of them commanded. Meduna looked at the food, then at the faces surrounding her. The villagers were watching, waiting. If she was truly innocent, she should have no fear. But she knew the truth. She had used that poison herself. If she ate it now, there would be no escape. With a sudden scream, she turned and tried to run, pushing past the villagers, desperate to flee. But the people of Lumora would not let her escape her fate. Hands reached out, grabbing her, forcing her back to her knees. There was no escape from justice. Her own fear was proof of her guilt. Meduna's heart pounded as she fought against the hands holding her. She knew that if she stayed, she would be forced to eat the very poison she had used to kill Zafina. There was no way out, unless she ran. With a sudden burst of strength, she twisted free and dashed toward the edge of the village. The crowd gasped as she pushed past them, her feet kicking up dust as she ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to escape, but fate had already decided her punishment. As she sprinted blindly, her foot caught on a loose stone, sending her crashing forward. She tumbled into a pile of drying herbs, her body landing hard against the wooden baskets that stored them. A sharp pain shot through her hands and arms as she scrambled to get up. But then she felt something strange. Her skin was burning. The villagers gasped. Elder Wamara stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you know where she has fallen?" he murmured. Someone whispered, "The poison." Meduna's breath hitched. Her hands were covered in crushed leaves, the same deadly herbs she had used to poison Zafina for years. Her face twisted in horror as the burning sensation spread. The poison had never affected Zafina, but it was different for her. She had no resistance, no immunity. She tried to wipe it off, but it was too late. Her body began to shake, a deep sickness curling in her stomach. Sweat poured from her skin, and her breaths became labored. "Help me," she croaked, reaching out, but no one moved. The villagers who had once feared her cruelty now turned their backs. The same people she had deceived for years had no pity for her now. Even Nasira, her own daughter, stood frozen, unable to move toward her mother. "You have brought this upon yourself," Elder Wamara said. His voice was calm, but firm. "The ancestors have delivered their justice." Baba Kendi stepped forward, his face unreadable. "You are no longer welcome in Lumora," he declared. "From this moment on, you are exiled. You will live alone, just as you tried to leave my daughter to die alone." Meduna's vision blurred. She reached for someone, anyone, but all she felt was emptiness. The village that had once been her home now cast her out. With no strength left, she staggered away, disappearing into the wilderness. No one followed. With Meduna gone, Zafina finally felt the weight of years of suffering lift from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was free. Free from cruelty, free from fear, and free to become the person she was meant to be. But freedom alone was not enough. She wanted to understand the strength that had saved her. She wanted to use it for something greater. Elder Wamara saw the fire in her eyes and knew she was destined for more. He took her under his wing, teaching her the secrets of herbs, potions, and healing. She learned how to cure fevers with a single brew, how to mend broken bones with the right mix of roots, and how to ease pain with the power of touch. But most importantly, she learned the power of resilience, the strength that came not just from her body, but from her spirit. As the years passed, Zafina's abilities became unmatched. Warriors came to her, seeking guidance in endurance and strength. She showed them how to push beyond their limits, how to endure pain without breaking, how to fight without fear. Her own body had become immune to poisons that could kill an ordinary person, and soon, people whispered of her as a legend. Her name spread far beyond Lumora. Travelers from distant lands came to see the woman who had survived the impossible. Kings and warriors sent messengers seeking her wisdom, hoping to learn her secrets. But Zafina never sought riches or power. She only wanted to help, to use the strength that had once been her curse as a gift to others. Where once she had been a helpless girl poisoned by hatred, she now stood as the strongest woman in all of Lumora, a healer, a warrior, a legend. Years passed, and the story of Meduna faded like a distant nightmare. No one in Lumora spoke of her anymore. The village thrived under Zafina's wisdom, and life moved on. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, a figure stumbled into the village. The woman was thin, her clothes torn and filthy. Her once beautiful face was hollow, her eyes sunken with hunger and sickness. She moved like a shadow, weak and broken. Some villagers gasped when they recognized her. Meduna had returned. She dropped to her knees in the center of the village, her bony hands trembling as she reached out. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. "I have nothing. No food, no shelter. Help me." But the villagers did not move. They remembered her cruelty, the suffering she had caused. They remembered the way she had poisoned Zafina, how she had lied and deceived. Now, she was nothing but a beggar, the same fate she had once wished upon the daughter of the man she betrayed. Meduna's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for someone who would pity her. Then, she saw Zafina. The girl she had tried to destroy now stood tall, strong, and full of life. Zafina's presence alone was proof that justice had already been served. Zafina stepped forward, her expression calm. She did not look at Meduna with hatred, nor did she smile at her suffering. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small piece of bread. She handed it to Meduna, who clutched it with shaking fingers. "The ancestors see everything," Zafina said softly. "Your punishment is already written." Meduna stared at her, tears filling her dull eyes. There was no more fight left in her. She had lost everything: her home, her family, her power. Now, Even the girl she had wronged showed her mercy, but mercy was not enough to save her. She took the bread, but her body was already too weak. A few days later, she was found near the outskirts of the village, alone and lifeless. No one mourned her. No one remembered her. The woman who had once lived through greed and hatred was now nothing more than a whisper in the wind. As the years passed, Zafina's name became more than just a memory. It became a legend. The people of Lemora told her story to their children, and their children passed it down to the next generation. Around the evening fires, elders spoke of the girl who had survived cruelty, the girl who had turned poison into strength. Her tale was not one of revenge, but of resilience, wisdom, and justice. Travelers who came to Lemora would hear of her and marvel at the strength of the woman who had once been a helpless orphan. They would visit the places where she had lived, hoping to catch a glimpse of the healer who could not be defeated. Kings and warriors, hearing of her great endurance, sent word for her wisdom, and many made long journeys just to seek her guidance. But Zafina never sought power or riches. She lived a simple life, using her knowledge to heal the sick and teach others how to overcome their struggles. She taught that true strength did not come from harming others, but from rising above pain and hardship. Her kindness and wisdom became the heart of Lemora, shaping the village for generations to come. Long after she was gone, her name remained. Parents whispered her story to their children as they drifted to sleep, a reminder that no matter how much cruelty the world might give, there was always a way to rise above it. The woman who had once been poisoned by hatred had transformed into a symbol of hope, proving that even the deepest suffering could be turned into power.